Good morning. It's May 27th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. It's Friday. There's a lot of dejection in Calgary today. The Battle of Alberta has finished. It looks like Edmonton pulled it off. Those nasty Northerners in the other half of our province. They elect Liberals, they elect NDP, and unfortunately, they appear to win hockey playoff games. Oh, well, I guess the cliche is just there's always next year, right? I know, too soon. It's going to be sensitive for a while. But that's the way it goes. At least we had a Battle of Alberta, first one in 30 years, and it's good to see. It was good seeing people packing those arenas on both ends at Edmonton and in Calgary. And I'm not terribly thrilled in watching Edmonton have a long run, but still, I am happy for the Edmonton fans having a good time and enjoying that, and hope there's lots of good games to follow. So let's see as we go into the day and see the other things that have to be observed today. It is National Cellophane Tape Day. Yes, it is. I don't know where these things come from, but that is what we've got going on. So celebrate cellophane tape. Could you imagine life without it? It's also National Grape Popsicle Day. Yes, these things are brilliant. You know, they get me things going while you viewers get on. But I mean, you wouldn't want to miss out on Grape Popsicle Day as well. I mean, not just any popsicle, but grape ones. I don't even know if I've had a grape one before. Those Mr. Freezies and everything. It hasn't been warm enough really to get too big into the popsicles yet. But those are the things today, you know. So go to the store, get your card, make sure to send it out, and wish everybody a happy Cellophane Tape Day and National Grape Popsicle Day. I got some good guests on. It'll be less light than the popsicle talk. Andrew Rulin of Integrated Wealth Management is going to come on. We've had Andrew on before, and we will talk about some financial things, financial planning. They've got an upcoming webinar and some stuff because, hey, we all want to retire. We all want to take care of our money, but we kind of need to leave that to the experts sometimes. As we self-govern with our financial management, yet we wouldn't dare, well, some people can, but don't try to fix your own car. You take it to a mechanic. So it'll be a good chat with Andrew, and he's a good conservative. Doris Kauffman of Pawsitive Match is going to come on, Rescue Foundation. Some people know I like to foster and adopt and rescue dogs. I really like animals, often much more than I like people. And they've got all of these rescue organizations are overloaded right now with pets and surrenders, and they really need people to step up and take care of these animals. It's another side effect of the pandemic. People went and adopted a bunch of pets while things were locked down, and then they got inconvenient when they went back to work and they dumped them in rescue. So it'll be a good conversation with her. Plus, we're going to have Western Standard's Rachel Emmanuel pop in to finish off the show at the end and talk about that bizarre episode of what's going on with Brian Jean in caucus, that story that broke last night, that exclusive we had with the Western Standard. Sounds like he was out challenging people to fisticuffs in the caucus. I guess more lively than normal, but you know, these are the people we're entrusting with our policy. It is of concern. All right, let me see. Let's talk about some idiocy as well. I'll get into my rant. So way back in the late 1980s, the North American issue cause celeb for the hard left protectionist was the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, in other words. I mean, in lacking a solid economic case for opposing deregulated trade, activists moved on to their usual tactic of playing on fear and emotion. They created the myth. This is what they did in Canada, created the myth that corporations were going to buy all the world's water and they were going to drain us dry. The Council of Canadians was formed and managed by noteworthy leftists such as David Suzuki and Maud Barlow. Yes, those names have been coming up for 30-some years now. The whole point of that organization really was to try and halt free trade. And they focused on the message that the big bad Americans would come up and take Canada's water if we allowed free trade, and we wouldn't be able to do anything to stop them. Their message was simplistic. They always began by pointing out how desperately dry California is and how abundant Canada's fresh water supplies were. They made the case that the Americans would move water from Canada's western lakes and rivers into California for irrigation and drinking, while paying pennies, if anything, for it. These myths were often accompanied by pictures of dry farm fields and depleted water reservoirs. It was a real frightening scenario indeed. Free trade was implemented despite the hysteric opposition from Canada's left. People who believed the mythology of the Council of Canadians must have lived in terror with the knowledge that desertification of Canada was impending. So 30 years later, what's happened to Canada's water? Well, nothing, not a thing. What the Council of Canadians and other advocates always glossed over in their fear-mongering was the rather important question of how this grand theft of water would actually happen. Water is actually notoriously difficult to move over long distances. It's heavy, it doesn't compress, and it needs to be moved in very large volumes to have any real impact anywhere. In BC, water would have to be moved over mountain ranges in order to get it down to California and through a few river valleys. From the prairies, it would have to go through multiple large river valleys, including even the Grand Canyon, which are already ironically carrying American water to coastal outlets. It would take a project thousands of times larger than the Panama Canal in order to move the equivalent of a small river from Canadian provinces to California. It just isn't in the cards, but that didn't stop them from claiming they would, and people from falling for it. Years of lobbying against any form of private water sales still has an impact on people. In BC, Nestle experienced fierce opposition for a bottled water facility in the Fraser Valley. Never mind that the Fraser River dumps more fresh water into the ocean in an hour than 100 bottled water plants could consume in a week. The principle of selling water has been entrenched into the minds of many as being evil. Now, bottled water makes up a tiny fraction of human water consumption. It garners the most criticism because it's our most visible form of consumption. To be fair, using bottled water is a bit wasteful due to the packaging involved and the presence of safely drinkable water from the tap in at least most communities. It really isn't a big deal, though, in the environmental or economic scheme of things. Most of the human use of water comes in the forms of irrigation and industrial uses. It should be remembered water used by humans will eventually go back into the system one way or another. Contaminated water, it's a real issue. Well, let's not pretend that the water simply vanishes from the world ecosystem the moment it is sprayed on a field or used in a factory. It goes back in the system, guys. Now, California still faces a crisis in water supply, and this is getting to where the stupidity really is getting big. They're draining lakes and rivers dry as the population grows and an ongoing drought continues. I mean, California is a dry state for the most part. The Mojave Desert isn't a result of global warming. It's thousands of years old. And as long as that state holds a large population, it's going to have challenges with water supply. In most of the world, desalination has been developed in nations with coastal access in order to tap the oceans for supply. Israel, Australia, and North Africa, they're all benefiting from these projects. Desalination is expensive and energy intensive, but it's getting cheaper, and it beats the hell out of dying of thirst or associated hunger when crops fail due to drought. California has a massive coastline along the largest ocean on Earth. The state's a natural candidate for large-scale desalination projects. Some plants are already in operation, and they're providing water to urban areas. In light of recent developments, though, it looks unlikely that desalination facilities will be developed further in California. Boy, there's a lot of tongue twisters in that one, though. A large project in Orange County, California, called Poseidon, would have provided 50 million gallons a day to the parched Huntington Beach area. But due to environmental and anti-capitalist lobbying, the project application was rejected. Millions of dehydrated citizens just turned their backs on an abundant supply of water in an act of pure idiocy. The environmental case against the plant was weak. The impact of such a plant on a massive water body like the Pacific Ocean is negligible, a literal drop in the bucket. Modern facilities dispose of brine effectively, and the ocean levels certainly won't be dropping due to the minuscule removal of water in desalination plants. The reason opposition to the project was successful was due to the demonization of private involvement in utility provision. Much like the Council of Canadians did in the 80s, American leftists created a myth that corporations would gain control of water and would bleed consumers dry. Indeed, it was projected that water bills might rise in California as much as $6 a month for some consumers due to this plant. Oh, unthinkable. They shout, water's a need. We should never allow it to be sold for profit. Well, food and shelter are needs as well. So who provides either of those better? How good is state-funded housing, guys? How well did the state control of agriculture work for the Soviet Union? Just because it's a need doesn't mean the government should run it. In fact, they should be less likely to run it. If people want treated water provided efficiently and affordably, they need to let the private market provide it. Apparently, in California, they'd rather die of thirst. Populations are growing, and we need to embrace new technologies in order to sustain them. Nobody can pivot to suit the changing of needs for consumers better than private businesses, yet we continue to shun them. We're in a battle of ideologies, and we're losing. The politics of fear and envy are winning, and we're all paying that price. And don't think that we're immune from this idiotic ideology here in Canada. Far from it. People in Canada would apparently rather die on a waiting list than let private involvement in healthcare expand. Turning away private medical investment while our system crumbles is no more idiotic than turning away a glass of water while you're dying of thirst. We're not any better, and we got to start thinking harder. That's what's got me wound up today. Let's bring in our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what he's got to keep me with my vein pulsing there. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
All right, I figured I'd give you one more look at this glorious beard before it
Yes.
gets shaved off tomorrow.
I'd forgotten. We're certainly going to miss that around here.
Yeah, I know you are. Hey, I hear Jane's not happy with Duke the Wonder Dog.
I don't know if it was Duke or Volstagg, but yes, or probably the two of them. She'd just gotten some new shoes on a recent visit to Vancouver, and the dogs consumed them today. She sent me the picture. She's not impressed.
No. And I hear they had some fun in the bathtub the other day.
Yes, so, these are what a 90-pound dog and a 50-pound dog pretending to be Purex kittens and got into the toilet paper roll. So I spent yesterday morning picking up toilet paper from throughout the house. And this isn't making it easier. I've got a guest coming on from an animal rescue. Guys, it's a bit of work taking these dogs in, but it's worth it in the end. But yeah, you got to protect your shoes and toilet paper.
You know what? You can't beat the love of a dog, and you have to treat new dogs just like babies. You have to dog-proof your house and make it clear. I mean, how many sandwiches do you have to lose, Cory, before you figure out don't leave them on the side?
I only lost one? No, two. Okay, two times it's happened, but it hasn't happened. And I eat, every day. So I'm getting better. They're training me.
Yes, exactly. As you say, it's worth it to have an animal in your life. They're just unbelievable. So, leading off our website at the moment is a column from our Ottawa political watcher, David Creighton, talking about the World Economic Forum and how that organization has stiffed Prime Minister Trudeau at Davos after criticizing his authoritarian ways. So that's going gangbusters on our website right now, Cory. Labatt's people are celebrating a $250,000 grant from the government to fix up a boiler in their brewery in Newfoundland. Keep in mind, this is Labatt's a company. Their overall company is Anheuser-Busch in the States. But they get they earn billions and billions of dollars selling beer. I consume a lot of it, and but they're getting some of our taxpayers' dollars to fix up a boiler. Controversial ruling, or what will be a controversial ruling, out of the Supreme Court of Canada this morning, Cory. If you remember the guy with the gun who shot up the Quebec mosque, killed 6 people. Well, he was sentenced to 40 years. After Stephen Harper's government brought in the fact that you could, not kill for free. If you killed one person, you're going to get 25 years, and if you get killed 2, you're going to get 25 years added on for a possible 50-year sentence. The judge in Quebec sentenced this guy to 40 years, and the judge says, no, that's unconstitutional. He must have a review after 25 years. So law and order people in Canada will not be happy with that one. Our Christopher Oldcorn is at the Western Premiers Conference today in Regina. He'll be filing several stories out of that. Our Lee Harding, the biggest Oilers fan that I know, is gleefully written a column basically bragging about how good Edmonton is and how bad the Flames are. I suggest readers don't even go there. Don't look. Don't bother. If you're an Oilers fan, you might like it. Mel Risden's done a story on 18 major U.S. airlines are being sued, and the FAA in the States is being sued over COVID mandates down there. So that'll be interesting to follow. And our Mike Thomas has done a nice community piece on the Wenzel family, now donating up to $20 million to the Cummings School of Medicine at University of Calgary. So we'll end on that happy note, Cory, and plugging away more this weekend. The Amber Heard jury is about to go out. So our Mike Thomas has done a piece on the large French property that Depp used to own, that he suggests that a jury might want to be sequestered in, as opposed to a downtown Los Angeles hotel. So that'll be upcoming, and it's a fun read, Cory.
It gets more bizarre and interesting as it goes. I guess it can't all be politics. Might as well watch the freak shows of Hollywood at times.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for the update, Dave, and we'll talk to you later and admire your beard for one more time.
Yeah, I'll let you rub your hands through it if you want.
We'll see.
All right. It's on the table for you.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Cory.
So, that's just a reminder to everybody. The reason we have so many stories, so many reporters, so much stuff going on is because you guys have been fantastic and subscribing And subscriptions are what drive us. We don't take tax funding. We qualify for it. If you look up that article, Derek applied just to see. And yes, not that we needed their permission, but the government said, yeah, we do think you're an official media outlet. Well, that's kind of them. But we could qualify for subsidies. We won't take them. But the reason we can get away with not taking them is because you guys subscribe, and it helps fund us so that we can keep expanding. We can get this bigger studio. We can get those reporters all over the place and have those this news coverage, so you don't have to rely on that legacy media that's been serving you so poorly for so long. So hey, check it out, westernstandard.news/membership, and take out a subscription. $99 for a year, guys. It's less than newspaper subscriptions used to cost you, and you get a good service in return. Like I said, we're not asking for charity. We're just asking for you to help pay for a service, and we'll keep providing it. I just want to reply to a commenter because it talks right into what I was talking about. Jennifer Schofield saying, corporations are controlling water. Nestle gets BC water for free and then bottle it and sell it back to us. So what? So what? They're pulling it, as I said, over by the Fraser River, where it's all just going to flow into the ocean anyways. The amount they pull is negligible, and you don't have to buy it. Don't buy it then. And they employ people. Those people pay taxes. They distribute it. You see, it's not just pulling water and selling water back to you, and they don't control it. You can go to the river and drink all the water you want. They don't own it. They're just taking from it, and they're making a product from it. It's clean water that's delivered, and it's convenient for you to put in your fridge or take hiking or whatever. And hey, if you don't want it, don't do it. Bottle your own water, put it in a reusable bottle, and take it hiking, or drink from the sink, or drink from the toilet, for all I care. But don't knock companies. It's a myth that it's causing a problem. It's not. So hey, if people want to buy bottled water, I don't. I find it wasteful, especially, brand names like Nestle. I mean, I imagine it's probably some brand name that makes those President Choice ones I buy anyways, but all the same, if you want to buy bottled water, go ahead. But it's not a big issue, despite what some people like to make of it. And then when they tie it into things like opposing free trade, then we get bigger consequences to smaller myths. But either way, I appreciate the comments. They're usually going to get a cranky response out of me, though. That's what I do. So I'll speak one more time before we get to our guest about a sponsor as well. It's not just memberships that keep us going, but it is those advertisers, and that's Bitcoin Well, a good Alberta company. If you're interested in digital currencies, this is the way to at least find out what they're about, see if you want to get into it, educate yourself. They're a Western Canadian company. They're publicly traded. I mean, part of it is if you're going to get into those sorts of things, you want to make sure you're getting good advice. You want to make sure you're dealing with a reputable establishment to do that. And Bitcoin Well is that. They will give you, I think that's their biggest selling point. Personalized one-on-one service. I don't trust things when I go online and I see a little pop-up window on the bottom right with a chat box there. Or if I have to talk to somebody who, hey, I don't want to knock people in foreign call centers. They're working their butts off, but they can't talk one-on-one with me about an Alberta issue. These are local people who will meet with you one-on-one and discuss your investments just like anything else. So it's important. And maybe it's not for you. That's the thing. The bottom line is educating yourself, knowing your options, checking them out, and being wise with your money. And that kind of segues well into my next guest that I'll be talking to pretty quickly here. That's Andrew Ruhland. He's been on before, and this isn't about digital currencies. This is about the currencies you're already dealing with, and he's with Integrated Wealth Management. Andrew's been on the show before, and will help. Well, as I was saying earlier, people like me, I'm terrible with my money. I'm lucky. My wife's a bookkeeper. She manages things carefully, but still, I use the analogy. I can't trust myself to work on my car. I'll take it to a mechanic, and not enough people are doing it with their money. If you should take it to a specialist.
Absolutely. That's one of the great things about our economy is that we have so much specialization that we can basically delegate anything that we're not good at, including the car or working on your own teeth as an example, right? So
yeah, the home dentistry. There was an old SCTV skit about that, actually. That was quite funny for grayer folks like us who might remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Just to bring up a side note, so you brought up and you sent me a link to an Adam Carolla podcast, and it was talking on the gun control thing. I just found that funny because I went to Idaho and back last weekend with my wife, and when I drive, I download, and Carolla is my favorite go-to, so it was just fluky timing on that.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't be plugging other podcasts so much, but if you want a good listen, and he's funny and he's conservative, actually, Adam Carolla is fantastic for that, and some good common sense there.
All right.
So where do we begin? I mean, it's a lot of the issues you've talked about. You've got a webinar coming up to help people through financial things. I mean, the things that are scary right now. I mean, we got this volatility, we got inflation, interest rates, they're starting to creep up.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to change the picture on things. People are kind of worried. They're scared. They've been working decades and they're maybe nearing retirement, and now they're not sure what to do.
Well, the first four and a half months of 2022 has been basically one of the worst starts to the year for equity markets in a very, very long time. NASDAQ's, from peak to trough was down about 32, 33% intraday. TSX has held up pretty well, better than, say, the Dow and the S&P 500. But the only reason the TSX has actually held up is because of energy stocks. And it was interesting, your earlier story on the desalination plant, is Orange County, and
Yes.
actually the lead guy was actually on Adam Carolla as well a few weeks back, talking about that. And basically, that's another example of how ideologically driven policy decisions get us into trouble really, really quickly. And we're seeing that here in Canada. We're seeing it as a result of the sanctions on Ukraine, different things like that. And so in any situation where there's basically some type of volatility or a crisis that's created, there's danger, but there's also opportunity. And so, starting like 14 months ago, we started investing very heavily in commodities, as an example, for a portion of client portfolios, because we could see coming the things that have been happening in the last year as a direct result of policy decisions. So there's another example of it. But I mean, so far this year has been pretty terrible for people who are just passively investing, or if they're with like a generic broker or in mutual funds or anything like that, because they don't have downside risk control. And so that's a key part of what we're going to talk about on the webinar tomorrow at noon, is actually stocks you can tolerate, managing downward volatility in stocks. But of course, everybody's also talking about inflation, which is eroding the purchasing power of their capital. And then, of course, there's this big problem with bonds, and this is a secular bear market for bonds, because we are now in a secular bull market for interest rates going up, and of course, the two are negatively correlated. And so people have typically relied on bonds for 30-40% of their investment portfolio to be their quote unquote safe money, and that money is basically guaranteed to go down in value. Because when interest rates go up, the value of their bonds go down. And so a lot of people find themselves between a rock and a hard place on that one.
Well, yeah, and that's hard too. I imagine, though, I mean, if your money's in something and inflation goes up, the value of it, in a sense, goes down as well, if you don't have interest rates building the equity within it to counter that. Yep. So it's always a balancing act with those types of savings. And
longer term, we know that things like real estate and stocks are great ways to outpace inflation, but that doesn't mean there can't be downward volatility in the short term, right? And we think that interest rates going up are going to actually be a bit of a headwind for real estate, because with super low interest rates, payments become more and more affordable, so the prices of homes can go up. But when the price of money goes up, when the payment or when the interest rate goes up, people don't qualify for quite as big a mortgage, so the price of homes is going to moderate a little bit as well. And so there's that dynamic, but stocks are the best long-term hedge against inflation, but a lot of people get pushed past their financial pain threshold.
Well, and that's, as you said, you right now you were pushing or recently on commodities because you saw them coming and they went up, but a couple of years ago, boy, they were in the toilet. They were terrible. So I mean, you want to make sure you're in and out at the correct times with investments, and that takes some skills to try and navigate.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the investment community says, well, you can't time the market. Well, you might not be able to time it perfectly, but it's really important to understand that the lower the price you buy something at and the higher the price you sell it at, the better your return is. And those transactions, when you're buying or selling, they take place in the medium of time. So for someone to say that timing doesn't matter means that they don't really understand how time works.
But some things, I guess, I mean, if you're talking about a diversified portfolio, you're going to have some things you're going to put money in, and you want to sit on that and just leave it alone for a longer term. But there'll be other things perhaps that you would want to go into and out of throughout the course. Like these things I honestly don't understand a lot about, but
right.
You want stability in part of that savings, but you also want some opportunity for some growth, I guess.
That's correct. Now, when it comes to how our managers manage portfolios, it's based on the idea of setting up an asset mix that will suit their long-term objectives, but also their risk tolerance. But then within each of those categories, within the asset mix, our managers are actively managing them. So they're overweighting into certain areas, underweighting in certain areas, and taking advantage of trends in the market.
Okay, yeah, and I imagine another variable in that is where that person is in their working life. I mean, you would have a different sort of portfolio you would put together for somebody who's, say, just getting into their early 30s and they've got a lot of working years ahead of them, or somebody like me in my 50s and I'm starting to think about retirement and things down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Every client portfolio is built on a custom basis, so it's all very customized to individual client needs, to their time horizon, income needs, and sleep at night factor is a big one.
Yeah. So where, maybe that's the magic question. We've got so many things we never could have imagined before coming out recently. I mean, the war with Russia and Ukraine, and the pandemic, of course. And now we know that these things can continue potentially happen in the future. Like there's going to be impacts that we can't avoid and things that we can't see coming. But where can you secure your future? Where can you feel at least a portion of your investment is going to still be there down the road for yourself?
Well, if you're talking about kind of the safer part of a portfolio, I would go with the diversified basket of private alternatives. That's a combination of private debt and private real estate. But if you're thinking more on the stock side or the opportunity seeking side, where you're going to have to put up with some more volatility, but you're going to get a higher return to outpace inflation, I would say that the commodity markets and the companies that produce them are probably the best bet. I'll use an example right now. Here in Calgary, we have what I would call basically a perfect storm. And the perfect storm has been created by the ESG movement, right? Basically, there have been supply constraints that have been created by regulation in Canada, by cancellation of pipelines in the States, by canceling leases and the sort, and then creating basically over reliance on one type of power over another, and it's basically destroyed a lot of supply. But as demand has rebounded post-COVID, basically price is going to go up. So invest in the things that benefit from terrible policy decisions.
Well, that's it. So you've got to watch policy decisions too, though.
Yes.
You got to watch the politics. Like people and decision makers do counterintuitive things. As for my earlier rant, I mean, California, you're parched, you're running out of water. Here's this proposal for a plant that's going to provide you with stable, secure water supplies, and you shut it down. It just makes utterly no sense. But again, if a person was investing in that proposal and in that plant, you want to see the political climate and know the risk you're taking on, even if it seems like a no-brainer from an economic point of view. It wasn't a safe investment, obviously, from a political point of view.
Right, and another ideologically driven decision. And I mean, I didn't think it was possible, but there's a dumber politician than Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden, and that's Gavin Newsom.
Oh, he's a
oh
piece
my
of
God, he's an empty suit. Man.
But it was just painful. It just floored me, like that one. Actually, the first hint I got of it was when I was driving back with Jane, because Corolla was talking about that. He lives in California. It's like, oh man, what are these doing down here?
Yeah.
But again, it makes it difficult to figure out what's safe or what's not. Okay, the world wants a bunch of oil, but we got a local company that's about to be shut in by a ridiculous domestic policy. Well, then you still don't want to invest in that company necessarily. So, I mean, you guys have got to be pretty busy all the time, kind of watching all those variables and juggling those balls.
Absolutely. It's a completely fluid situation. And because risk is dynamic, portfolios have to be dynamic, right? If they are ever shifting, ever changing, you need to kind of adjust in real time to all that.
Well, that's it. And as you said, I guess seeing those things, if you can have the people doing it on your behalf, and if you know what's coming, you can make out well. I mean, when you know the bottom of something in value and get in at the right time, you're doing great. If you, I even talked about Bitcoin earlier. Okay, that's a questionable area, but a lot of people lost a lot of money on Bitcoin in the last while because it's dropped dramatically.
Timing is everything, actually.
Yes.
Right. So there's an example of people who I think perhaps might concentrate a lot of belief in one asset class or one sector. You could think of it as big tech, just as another example, or if somebody was all in on real estate or all in on gold stocks, right? And things don't always work out the way that you think. So it's better to be approximately right rather than risk being precisely wrong.
Mm-hmm. And then, so when it comes to, say, international, or investing in things that are outside of the borders, is that a way, I guess, like currencies vary? You could have a value in something in Canada by Canadian dollars, but perhaps the other country's currency didn't move in the same sort of way. How does that impact investments when you're coming from Canada to another? These are just things I don't quite.
It actually has a very, very significant effect on client portfolios. And in fact, diversification outside of the Canadian dollar has been one of the things that has kept our client portfolios so stable. Because when the US dollar or when equity markets decline, typically the US dollar strengthens. And so even our US dollar-based investments don't fall as much as they appear to be in pure price when you adjust for local currency. And that's why our client portfolios are down by 40 or 50% of what the markets are, as opposed to being down the whole amount.
So when getting somebody involved, and I imagine that's a lot will be covered in the webinar. I mean, what sort of sizes are you talking for portfolios too? I mean, I got to admit, my early years in the working world, I wouldn't even consider these things because, hey, I'm just paying hand-to-mouth, rent and so on. But later in life, you start saving up. At what point is it important to start getting somebody involved in managing your finances?
Well, even before you have somebody involved in actually helping you to manage your finances, the first thing you have to do is save, because you can hire somebody else to manage your money. You can't hire somebody else to save it. So you start there.
Well, if there's nothing to manage, then
exactly,
no point,
exactly, right? So investor behavior is the first and most important thing. But we work with clients typically over the age of 50, often, not necessarily, but we base our minimum portfolios on client's age, because we can't expect someone under the age of, say, 50 to have the same amount as someone, say, who's 60 or 65. We do work a lot with business owners and ranchers and farmers, because they understand risk, and they understand the cycles of nature, and how you have to, have some grain set aside in the barn for the bad years, quite literally.
Yeah, I mean, the agricultural sector, again, is the top of volatile. I mean, they'll have a lot of capital assets, but if they get a few bad years, their cash flow can be horrifically bad. You don't want to be selling off acres all the time to make your bills. So if you can find ways to balance.
Yeah, certainly farming is an equity building enterprise. It's not an income generating enterprise for most people. So.
Yeah, I remember that from Pritis, one of my regular customers who owns a lot of ranch land out there and everything else, and he's doing quite fine. But all the same, he also likes driving his '85 pickup truck when he comes out to the coffee shop. He's not living the high life. He's got to be careful with his money.
Yep.
So one of the things I like about talking to you too, though, and seeing your emails and such, but you're unapologetically conservative. I guess that helps with your relationship with ranchers and such, though you don't mix your politics with your investment advice. But
we don't mix the politics
no,
with the investment advice, but it's
course.
important to have, I would say, a similar worldview for the advisor that you're working with, because if I show up with ear gauges, a beard, and a vote liberal sticker on my car, well, we're probably not going to see eye to eye.
Yeah, well, it's part of it. It's a relationship. I mean, the goal is long-term investment. It means they're theoretically going to be dealing with you guys for a while, and plus you want similar goals. I mean, some people are willing to take a lower return if they go into, they feel, I guess, investments that are more woke-based, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that whole ESG idea has actually started to be, I'll say it's becoming more obvious that ESG is a bit of I'll call it a scam. It's basically just like a social credit score for companies. And while it's been popular, it's not necessarily effective. And frankly, I think it's a fad that is quickly passing by. And ultimately, what you need to do is you just need to be a little bit agnostic and apolitical. And certainly our portfolio managers, they're far less concerned about the carbon footprint of a company than they are about their financial performance, right? As long as they're not doing obvious damage to the environment and getting in the news, then it's really a moot point.
I mean, the goal is a return, and I mean, even if you got into Beyond Burger at the right time, that meat that those guys
Beyond Meat, yeah,
took off like a rocket. Even if some people got upset because they say it's vegan push. Well, I mean, from an investment point of view, it doesn't matter. If you got into that on the ground level, you could have done very well for yourself. So
yeah, and you have to have pulled out in order to have not gone downhill with it.
Yes, but it's an example where somebody might miss an opportunity just because their own personal ideologies or prejudices can color that, and you don't want to do that in your investment portfolio. It's important to.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing to remember is that if you miss out on an opportunity, just like buses, there's another one coming along.
Yeah, there's always more companies coming and going, and again, it's finding the right ones, and you don't want to get on the bus that's going to crash. So
Yeah, definitely.
the
That's why you want a driver.
Yes.
Right?
So, I mean, you guys provide all sorts of information. As I said, there's so many variables, so many questions. I got my areas of expertise, so, ranting,
Mhm.
raving, annoying people, and I focus on those. But, finances aren't so much mine. That's why I like talking to others. So you've got a webinar coming up, though. That's the
Yep.
big thing that's coming up. That's a lot of what you guys have driven your business with is giving those extended, I guess, educational sort of things. So perhaps know a little more about the webinar and where they can get involved with it.
Exactly. So the webinar is tomorrow at noon Mountain Time, and it's called Forward-Looking Investments or Forward-Looking Investing for Independent Thinkers. And that pretty much encapsulates the type of people that we like to work with and the type of people that we are, right? So, you have to skate to where the puck is going to be as opposed to where it is, as Wayne Gretzky famously said, and you have to do the same thing in investments. So it'll run about 50 minutes or so, and we'll give an overview of kind of who we are, but the risks and the opportunities that we see out there right now, and explain a little bit about the structure of how we work and basically how we deliver the results that we do, which are, very solid long-term returns without the night terrors.
Yeah. So they have to sign up in advance, or can it be?
Yes.
Yes.
So they can go to the opinion section on Western Standard.
Yep.
We have an article there linked. You'll see the green model there, which describes our business model. And also, you could just go to i-wealth at i-wealth.ca, and you can sign up there as well.
Great. Now, I know that 99% of our viewers today are paid subscribers for the Western Standard, but for that 1 in 100 who aren't, that one's actually not behind the paywall. So you can get to that piece on the Western Standard. It's in the opinion section. It's in the features section, and get the link to that seminar and see what it's all about. So
awesome.
I would suggest people check it out. And like I said, I mean, as you said, it's a longer term thing. You're building a relationship. That's what I see. It's similar to what I was talking about with another, but just that it's local, it's trustworthy. I mean, this is a big deal to people, and this is very important. They've worked very hard for their money, and they want to make sure it's always in the best hands they can.
Definitely.
So,
I'll mention one last thing, and that is oftentimes people are busy, especially on weekends, right? A lot of family time, or just get caught up in other things other than work. So if they can't attend live at noon tomorrow, if they register, they will get a link to a recording of the webinar as well.
Okay.
So
excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming in to join us again today, Andrew. And keep those links to those other podcasts coming to me too.
Yeah, lots of fun.
All right. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Cory.
All right, guys. So yes, that's Andrew Rulin of Integrated Wealth Management. As I said, he's been on before, and as you can hear, he's got a lot of good common sense to share and some, financially educated knowledge to share. I mean, everybody's got advice on the internet about what you should be doing with your dollars, but not all of them have good advice. That's the important part. As I say, you work hard for that money. You want to make sure that it is as well taken care of as possible. So check those guys out online. Brad saying, maybe if you won the lotto, you would invest. Yeah, I know. It's not all of us have as much liquid means to take care of these things as others. But it's important to have it properly taken care of out there if you can. So yes, we're going to have our next guest in a little bit here. I'll talk about another sponsor before we get there, and that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Speaking of people building relationships with and being reasonable with, if you have firearms, enjoy firearms, want to get involved in firearms, you want to do it safe, you want to do it legally, you want to do it responsibly. And that's getting involved in association, building a network, and looking at the resources. That's all there. That's what it is. It's an association. Check them out. They stand up for your rights to legally own firearms. I mean, we've seen some terrible uses of firearms recently, but that's not the legal use of it. We want to make sure that line is always drawn between those of us, who would never commit a crime, and unfortunately those people who do. So these guys lobby on your behalf. They provide a lot of resources. And again, if you're in, if you want to get involved in firearms, for target shooting or hunting or collecting, whatever, this is the place to go. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. It's CSSA-CILA.org, or just Google them up and you will find them. So going a little further, let's talk about a few news items before we have a guest on in a little while here. And here's an interesting story, and it's got a bit of a personal aspect, and it kind of ties in with what Dave was talking about with one of the stories that's breaking. There's a fellow named Hunter Van Mackelberg. People might have heard me relate a few times on how my bar got repeatedly robbed a couple of years ago when I owned it. by a gang of, it turns out, pretty chronic and dangerous criminals. And Hunter Van Mackelberg, after he'd robbed my bar when he was released on bail, went out and it was a horrible crime, took out a young man who he felt was coming onto his girlfriend, led him out into a field and shot him in the head. So he got sentenced to life in prison with no parole for 12 years. Mackelberg is only 21. And with the time he served in remand, which is usually double, triple time, and then 2/3 mandatory release and things like that, Mr. Mackelberg is going to be quite young and out of there before very long. I can only hope that maybe he's learned and he's reformed himself. But this is really distressing. We're getting this trend. It's just like the story I wrote about last week, where we've had 3 Albertan mothers who unfortunately were murdered just in Alberta in less than a year. All 3 cases were repeat dangerous offenders. And now we've got the Supreme Court just ruled that you can't have concurrent sentencing. What that means is, even if it's a car theft, if you stole 10 cars and you got a year for each car theft, it doesn't matter. You're only going to be sentenced to the 1 year. You get 10 for 1. That even applies to murders. I don't think lunatic murderers would think about that when they're committing a crime, that, okay, once I've shot 1, it's going to be the same price for the next 10 I shoot. But I do think, a repeated crime, a multiple crime, calls for some degree of a higher penalty than others. I mean, can we not use some reason? I don't want to see a person who's convicted of 25 shoplifting crimes doing 20 years in prison. That's unreasonable as well. But to say that you can't have concurrent sentencing with multiple crimes, well, we've got a problem there too, particularly with dangerous offenders. And we seem to be going the wrong way, and we're having a lot of serious crimes going on right now. So that comes up to the case of that horrible man who killed 6 people in a mosque. I mean, that's a hateful, very disturbed person. 6 innocent people who are just worshiping. And now he's only convicted of 1 because they don't do concurrent sentencing. So he could be out in some years. It'll be a while yet, but he could be out. I don't want people like that out. So, I mean, our court system really has some serious things to address. Okay, we've got our guest in, though, and I'm looking forward to speaking to her. And this is Doris Kauffman of Pawsitive Match, right?
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. I appreciate you coming in.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the invite.
Yeah, so, I mean, viewers of our show know anyways, and Dave and I do the banter all the time. My wife and I have been involved in fostering and dog rescue, and of course, a number of foster fails. And we live on an acreage, so we can keep a number of animals. But we're maxed out right now, too, in fostering and turning over. And we're noticing, of course, all of the agencies are dealing with the same thing. There's a number of factors behind it right now, but I just want to get the word out to people, because a lot of people don't understand how it works necessarily even as well. Like, perhaps you can't commit to adopting, but you could foster, or again, just things such as donating. So perhaps if you could just start with a nutshell about your organization.
Sure, yeah. So Pawsitive Match is a 100% volunteer-run organization. Many of the rescues, of course, are. And we focus our time in Alberta, really trying to, get the dogs and cats that need homes right here locally with a permanent family. Along the route, it also means that we do require foster families, like you spoke of. And so for those that aren't necessarily in a position where they're ready to adopt just yet, or maybe just can't do the time commitment or what have you, they feel that, they can contribute at least by fostering. And that's a really significant help for us as well.
Yeah, and that's part of why I wanted to talk. Like I said, we've taken in as much as we can for now. And we deal with a different group, but I mean, they're maxed out, and we wish we could take more. So, I mean, I just want to get the word out. Some of the pressure can be taken off right now, and this is a way that you could do it. I mean, not everybody's suited as well.
No, but you know what, particularly heading into the summer months, because we do have anywhere in the neighborhood of 300 or so foster families, but some of those families take, just fosters year round at any given time. Others will take a foster for a little while, take a break, and then maybe in 2 or 3 months' time, bring in another dog or cat. But of course, they take vacations and everything else as well, right? So, so over the summer months, it's helpful. Even if we have some temporary placement foster homes are helpful for us as well. So if you find that you've got a little bit of extra time over the summer and you're kind of considering maybe getting an animal yourself, but this is a good trial run for you, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, and that's it too. A lot of the problems we have is people impulsively sometimes will get a pet, and it turns out it's not for them.
Yeah.
And that's how they often end up in rescue or even abandoned in the worst cases or things like that.
Yeah.
Even if they meant well to begin with. I mean, fostering is a good opportunity to see if it's right for you, realize the challenges that come with having an animal in your household, and perhaps it's not for you, but then at least you've learned it before committing and having another animal stuck in rescue.
Absolutely. And that said, though, one thing that we notice with pretty much most of the animals that we bring in is that they're in various stages of just kind of stress. They're out of sorts, right? And then that's not surprising. These are animals that don't have families, and so were probably strays. They were not being taken care of. Maybe they're malnourished. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they're just scared. And it takes time for them to decompress from that. So even when they come into a foster family, and that's the whole point of the foster family, is that it's one of those steps that help that animal to be prepared, so that when they're ready for adoption, that they really are in a good state, both healthy, but physically, but also mentally.
Yeah, and it's just like with children or anything else. I mean, they're going to be problematic ones coming in, and it is more than just taking an animal in and babysitting it and just feeding and keeping it going.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's important. I mean, you want to hopefully socialize the dog, build the trust, or a cat, or whatever it may be, so they understand that, because they might have been abused. Unfortunately, there's some hard cases, and if you can build that, it'll make it a lot easier for them to integrate with a family when they find a permanent adoption.
Absolutely, and most of those animals are quite resilient when it comes right down to it. They need time to decompress, and they need all those kind of safety measures that are put in place for them. But once they get to that point where they realize, it's okay, I am healthy again, I am safe, then their personality really starts to shine through, and they can be very loving additions to families.
Oh yeah, and that's where a lot of the foster fails start happening too.
That is exactly where that happens.
But you bring them in, you get attached, and you just end up adopting anyways. And we've done that. I mean, it can be hard. That's the other thing. If you take an animal in, we turned over a number over the years, and boy, you get really attached. Okay, hey, we found an adopter. Oh, geez, let him go. There was one we were with the Alberta Bulldog Rescue years ago, and he came in, and that poor fellow was so covered in mange and in terrible condition. And he came back up to health and was a beautiful, friendly dog. And I know Jane had a really hard time letting him go, but he went out and had a, still, I don't know if he's still going now. It's been some years, but he had a wonderful life in a place later on. So
it's perfect. Yeah.
You got to remember, okay, it's hard parting with them, but it's satisfying when we took him out of such a terrible situation.
100%. Now, that said, we need volunteers of every sort,
yes,
right?
Okay, I wanted to move into that.
Exactly. Well, I mean, one thing that surprised me when I started volunteering with this organization is that it really takes a village of people behind the scenes to get just one animal adopted, right? So we need transport volunteers. We need people that are helping out with things that's just paperwork and office kind of related stuff. We have a holding facility where cats and dogs stay until we can find them a foster family. And they, of course, need to have lots of volunteers go there to walk the dogs, to get, their meals prepared, and to, change litter boxes for the cats, all sorts of things, right? So, but it really takes a lot of people. And even if you're not in a position where you necessarily want to foster an animal, there's lots of different ways that you can help.
Yeah, all sorts. And then, so something, and I haven't researched as much, but the adoption fees when somebody chooses to adopt, it doesn't matter the specific. I remember some people would get upset sometimes with ABR, and others like, well, you're trying to adopt out dogs. That's so high. That's unreasonable. What are you doing? Are you greedy?
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason for fees, and that they're not out of bounds, but that you have to set that bar somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can appreciate at least initially why people might be a little bit sticker shocked, but there's a few things that are important to remember. Number one, we are a not-for-profit organization, as are many of the rescues, right? So the fees that we charge for adoption really just offset our operating costs. There's that. But the other important thing is this. When you adopt an animal, some people will maybe get their dogs or puppies or what have you from Kijiji, and maybe that's a pretty reasonable price, right? What they're not taking into consideration is all of the behind the scenes things that could be impacting their bottom line and how much money they're putting into that dog. So, for example, with our pets and our animals, whether cats or dogs, they come microchipped, spayed and neutered, vaccinated, dewormed, and so ultimately you're getting all of these pieces that do have a dollar value associated with them. The adoption fees are also set a little bit based on, a bit of supply and demand. Puppies, are going to cost you a little bit more than a senior dog, for example. So the prices vary a little bit, right? So for cat adoption, it's anywhere from $150 to about $225, and for dogs, again, depending on their age, et cetera, $225 up to $595. But one way or another, they are all health checked, vaccinated, and cleared for adoption. Not just physically, but we also make sure that those animals are prepared mentally, that they're at a state where they're really going to contribute to a family and be a loving part of it.
Yeah, well, and part of being in a position to take on a pet, you have to have a degree. I mean, you don't have to be rich by any means, but you got to have a few bucks, and it kind of sets a bit of a bar. Some people may be the most well-meaning, but if you can't come up with a few $100s, you won't be able to pay a vet bill if it happens to come up, or some of the other issues. So maybe you might want to wait a little longer before it's time to invest in a relationship with an animal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And part of it ties into the volunteering. What we used to do with ABR was home checks and just actually checking to make sure this is somebody appropriate who can permanently take this dog or even foster it appropriately. We remember one, she was the most well-meaning person and so emotional. Says, I don't have a lot of money, but I'll make up for it in love. Well, love doesn't pay the vet bill. And particularly in our case, when it was bulldogs, unfortunately, they're beautiful but overbred animals with a great deal of health issues.
Yeah.
You've got to have some room on your credit card if you're going to have one of those.
Yeah. But you raise a very good point, though, right? We and not just Positive Match, but really most rescue organizations want to make sure that if they're going to place an animal, that it's a permanent situation with a loving individual or family. And that also means that we need to take a look at, what kind of living situation that person has. Do they live in a condo? We then need some sort of a letter indicating that, yep, they are allowed to have a dog or a cat. There's all these different things that are in place so that we can prevent an animal from coming back to us is what the ultimate goal is.
Yeah, well, and that's the term that's used by most organizations. You're looking for the forever home.
Yep.
I mean, they've already been bounced a time or two. That's why they're in rescue.
That's right.
Like people or anything else, it's hard on them. I mean,
Yeah.
the instability, the rejection, abandonment.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that the next one is it. Okay, you're going to settle in and have as good an animal life as you can.
That's right. But there's so many people that are willing to commit to that, though, and that's wonderful.
So the right pet for the right place is important too. Yeah. I mean, we're on an acreage, so one that we've got right now, he was a foster fail, but is a great big giant. I don't know what he was. He was bred with an elk or something. But he has a great time running around our place in a big fenced yard and everything. But he would have a terrible time if it was a person in a small condo in the city who couldn't get him out.
Of course.
Working. But at the same time, I live in an area with cougars and bears. A very small dog wouldn't be appropriate in our area because it could actually be dangerous to the animal.
Yeah,
So,
and maybe it relates a little bit to someone's lifestyle as well. If there's somebody that loves going out hiking every weekend, well, then bringing the Chihuahua is maybe not the best way to go either, right?
No, that's with the bulldog rescue as well. People think, I'll get a bulldog for a jogging partner. Don't do that. You can't even walk them more than 2 blocks, and they're tired out. It's done with them. But that's just part of what all these organizations do. I mean, the goal is always to make sure you match up the right person with it. Sometimes people don't. It's an impulse thing. Oh, it's the cutest thing I ever saw. I have to have it now, but you don't think everything through. So the organization can help you.
Yeah. And we do. We also, because sometimes people have never had a pet at all before. And so they don't necessarily know what kinds of things they need to be looking out for themselves. And that's where our volunteers help out too, right? Because they do point out all those things that they need to consider and think about and make plans for, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think most people who want to get a pet, they're right. It will work out and it will be great. But you just want to make sure you've checked off all the boxes to make it as good an experience as possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how are you guys doing for capacity? Like, we're reading a lot of stories again. I mean, some of it was kind of a lot got turned back over COVID. People went back to work and realized, now this is inconvenient. And you don't want to shame people. That's another thing. Rather they turn them into rescue than neglect or abuse an animal. But there's been a surplus. How's that doing right now? Is it been stabilizing a bit, or?
Well, I mean, so certainly the pandemic, it brought us a number of different anomalies in our lives, didn't it? But I think if you look at sort of the last few years, we typically have anywhere between a 10 and 15% return rate for the animals. And there's different reasons for that. Mostly it's lifestyle changes. So whether or not the pandemic, influenced that, that's possible, right? As far as some job losses or employment status, et cetera. Maybe it's, your own personal situation, marriages, divorces, those kinds of things, right? But by and large, 10 to 15% of the animals do get returned to us. We do, of course, at times where we can, we work with the family to try to turn things around as far as, if it's a behavioral issue that is leading to the reason for the return. And then we can suggest trainers that do force-free training with the animals and with their families, those kinds of things. But generally speaking, most of the adoptions that we have every year, which is around 800 to 1,000, are successful, and that makes us happy. Now, the one thing that did happen last year, and we're not sure if it is pandemic related or not, but the number of dogs that we have, the number of dog adoptions was down by about 50%. And we're not sure exactly what that is. So it could be somewhat pandemic related and people's changes in their lives. But at the same time, it could also be that because there was less travel, we also had less dogs being brought in from places like Mexico, the States, Thailand, like we have, those rescue organizations that we partner with there. And because of that, it also meant that we didn't have as many small dogs as we typically do. So again, we try for the most part to help out those Alberta dogs. But when we have availability and space, we bring in the small dogs, and the smaller dogs oftentimes get adopted first because a lot of families find it easier to work with a smaller dog than the bigger ones.
Yeah. Well, and there's, again, different needs for different people. And some of the trends are hard to read. I mean, they'll have their ups and downs. Do you deal with other animals besides dogs and cats then?
Just dogs and cats.
Okay. Because I know some other organizations deal with, I think ferrets are some that I get trained in occasionally. I know many years ago I had an ex who had one. I got to admit, I couldn't stand that thing. I didn't abuse it, of course, or anything like that, but I didn't miss the ferret at all when it was gone either. It's just not for everybody. And some people really love their ferrets. So
absolutely.
Good on them.
I'll put it this way. We have a board of directors that really does a great job at, again, all volunteers, but they really do a great job at balancing out, the realities, financial and resource realities of an organization versus how many animals we have in our care. And we'd love to say yes to many more, you can't always. And so the concentration is really just on cats and dogs, and also maintaining a level of animals within our care at any given point that's manageable.
So beyond volunteering, which of course helps in fostering and adopting, you guys are you a registered charity? I know not every association is. Okay. So I mean, of course, donations always help.
Donations always help, and I mean, when it comes right down to it, straight financial donations are the biggest help for us, because like oftentimes you can have an animal whose medical bills exceed what their adoption fee actually is, right? I mean, it balances itself out in some regard, but that is our biggest expense truly when it comes right down to it. But rather than, if somebody gives a financial donation directly, they get a tax receipt, but there's other ways they can donate too, because we have fundraisers throughout the year. You need some hanging baskets for Mother's Day. We've got those for you. And of course we tack on a little bit of extra and make some money from it that way. But there's another, for those people who like drinking their beers over the summer and have all these extra cans laying around, well, there's an app called Skip the Depot. And you can just log on to that app and you can register whatever your donation is of cans and bottles that go directly to an organization. They keep a small processing fee, but it's, plus they come to your house and they pick it up for you, Cory.
Trouble-free as it is. I mean, hey, I hate going to the bottle depot.
Right.
It's fly-filled and stinky. Hey,
skip the dish, or not skip the dish, just skip the depot.
Let's get to those. Do you have other events coming at any time?
Nothing right away, but you can absolutely look at our website, pawsitivematch.org, and any sort of upcoming fundraisers or things like that. Plus, there's merchandise even on the site that people can buy too. Yeah.
So. Just something you mentioned, actually, I just thought of as well. I mean, I don't know, different organizations have different resources. So with training and things like that, like at one point we took on a deaf dog, and that took a lot of specialized training. And they put us in with classes for dog training, and the organization took care of those fees for us. But you guys offset some training fees sometimes in dogs if they have more needs than others? Or?
Yeah, so when we first get animals in, we do right away is an assessment with a veterinarian, and then if needed, we also work with animal behavioralists. That's not necessarily true for every animal, but those that need extra care and attention, we make sure to get that need fulfilled for the animal, because again, we don't want to put a dog or cat in a situation where they're probably just going to get returned anyway, right? We really want to do our absolute best to make sure they are ready. And that includes being physically healthy, being mentally healthy, and then they become a positive energy and member of a family.
Great. Well, I'm not sure if there's more you'd like to cover before we let you go here. I think we crossed a lot of ground there. And again, I appreciate the work you guys do, and you're coming in to talk to us about it. Was there more you'd like to add before?
No, you know what? Just that that again, we really would consider that, or would love it for people to consider volunteering, all of it, obvious, really.
Yeah.
But please take a look at our website. We've got lots more information on there for people, and any volunteer is happy to talk to them at any given point. So by all means, reach out and we can answer those questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, and let's hope that your dog population turns over and we just keep finding out.
We hope so. We hope so. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So yes, that was Doris Kauffman of Pawsitive Match, and there's many organizations, and they fill different needs, though. I mean, they tend to be the same ones. The goal is just to find the best life possible for these animals that find themselves, unfortunately, between homes, and it takes a lot of work. And I just wanted to expand on it because not everybody necessarily understands all those steps. Yeah, you can't just take in a rescue dog and put it straight into a household. It takes some work. It takes some resources. Likewise, for the people fostering, for the people adopting, there's a lot of steps, and not everybody's familiar with it. I'm just hoping maybe a few viewers, or maybe you know somebody, who, again, anywhere from donating a few bucks to one of these organizations. I didn't even bring up the one that we deal with because I don't want anything to look like a conflict. There's a number of them, and they all do a lot of good work, and Pawsitive Match is certainly one of them. So if you're considering one, or like I said, the fostering thing, people don't think of, they don't realize that happens. I think it's a good way to volunteer and put in some services, and maybe discover if you should get a dog or a cat. As I said, maybe it's just not for you after 2 weeks, or maybe again, you fall head over heels in the one you foster, and suddenly you've got another dog that's adopted, or you just like fostering and you keep bringing them in temporarily and turning them over. It all helps, guys. I'm not the mean and heartless conservative in every way that some people sometimes anticipate. I got a particularly soft spot when it comes to the animals. So check them out, Pawsitive Match, and or any of the others. There's many different ones out there. Let's see here. Yeah, puppy mills. That's another issue altogether. That I think it was Brad that brought it up, or somebody else. Those things drive me nuts. It's totally unregulated, I believe, but it's hard. I'm a libertarian-minded person. I don't want to see more regulation and more crackdown and more government typically. But puppy mills, I mean, basically, if you got some space, and some of them are terrible, they're just breeding factories. And when, the reason we found out about rescues and fostering was all through bulldogs way back when. And to buy a purebred bulldog is extremely expensive. You're looking at $2,000 or $3,000. So we were shocked, like, why are these ending up in rescue? Why would dogs like that be there? Well, there's a number of reasons. Like I said, they get high vet bills. They aren't dogs for everybody. They can't swim if they're a good pure breed. They might swim a few feet and they tire out with those little legs and that giant body. They aren't good jogging partners. They aren't good guard dogs. People think they're tough dogs. They aren't. They're strong. There's no aggression in them whatsoever. Either way, they end up in rescue. And a lot of them as well come from those bloody puppy mills that raise them because they're $2,000 to $3,000 dogs. Some people just feel that they can just breed the hell out of these things and sell them, and they do. I'm not big on people buying from breeders anymore. And hey, I did it before. I'm not going to shame people who did it. And every dog still needs a home, even if it's a purebred. But and not every breeder is unprincipled. There's some very good ones out there. But we would get a lot into rescue because, again, as I said, there was a deaf one we took on. Because, oh, darn, this one's deaf. Well, we're just going to dump it in rescue because we can't get money selling that. And we had that one that was covered in mange I was talking about. All that one needed was some care and medication. And he was a beautiful dog, show quality bulldog. But the puppy mill was too lazy to deal with it. And just dumped it on us. So, and this happens with every kind of dog out there. And there's lots that end up on reserves. Of course, there's huge problems. A lot of rescues from reserves. There's foreign ones, one surrender. They end up with them for all sorts of reasons. So anywhere where you can help out, pitch in, fostering a few bucks, as she said, for some pop cans and bottles. Sylvia saying, did I mix up concurrent and consecutive sentencing? Consecutive is when someone must finish the sentence for one before starting the next. Concurrent is when they're all lumped together in one. I probably might have misspoken at some point. I mean, those two words are similar, and as I'm ranting, I might have got it backwards. But I appreciate the correction, and that's what the deal is, exactly, of course. And the problem is they are not letting them, they've changed it so you can basically get all of them packed into one sentence rather than dealing with paying the price for multiple crimes on multiple levels. What's this Anne saying about puppy mills often operate with stolen dogs as well? Yeah, if you get breeding dogs, it's not good. What's this in BC? The owners of the park were live trapping people's cats, even though the SPCA were closed, so they just dropped them off in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, people abandon animals. There's all sorts of things. I mean, literally in Florida, and I got no use for them. But they got a problem with like pythons and anacondas and stuff in the Everglades because people, again, irresponsibly buy a little snake and holy cow, it grows into a big snake. Now I don't want it anymore. And they dump it in the swamp. And it's a problem. They got to catch these things now and get them out of there. People dump animals. Was it very recently I'd heard about? Yeah. Well, that was in Sandpoint when I was down in Idaho. Yes, because of course my stepfather there, I guess his brother works at the waste transfer station. Somebody dropped a box of kittens at the place and just left them there. I guess it's better than drowning them in the old ways. The main thing, fix your dogs, fix your cats, guys. Then you won't have to deal with these things. There's all sorts of programs, all sorts of vets. That's another issue too. Either way, not everything's always about politics. So I thought I'd bring some rescue people in and talk about that. We're going to have some politics pretty soon when Rachel comes in and go over some of the stuff that she covered in that weird story with Brian Jean in the caucus meeting. Let's talk about our sponsor another time to get that through, I guess, and that's Bitcoin. Well, I know somebody else saying they don't trust Bitcoin. That's fair enough. There's different types of investments, different sorts of things. That's why I did want to bring it up with Andrew as well, that, it's not for everybody. And I don't think that they're much into digital currencies over at Integrated Wealth Management. I don't know, actually. I didn't ask them directly. They're separate things. But if you're looking into getting into digital currencies, looking to use them, the thing that's interesting with Bitcoin Well is they can make it practical. They bring it home for you, right? You can have your account with it and you can pay your utility bills. You can deposit into ATMs all throughout Western Canada. They make it simple and it makes sense. It's a currency. It is what it is. It's a digital one, but it's a complicated thing. And not everybody's familiar with those things. So Bitcoin Well are the ones to help lead you through it and see if it's for you. Bitcoin savings plans, and they can have automatic debit from your bank account, so it goes in trouble-free and simple. Check them out, guys. If you're looking to get into digital currencies, bitcoinwell.com. Learn about them from a trustworthy Alberta company and see if it is for you. Okay, here's an interesting one too. It kind of ties in as well. Sting cites bank misconduct, aggressive sales tactics, and they remain commonplace in major banks. This is one of those things too. So it says auditors posing as customers were routinely oversold products they neither sought nor required. This is sorry, I'm not sure what you're asking about with the $5,000 minimum, Brad. And for people listening on audio, I do respond to the comments as they come. So Brad was asking, do you see a $5,000 minimum? I'm not sure what he's referring to. But either way, just because you're at a big bank, sometimes people think, well, they wouldn't screw me on an investment deal or anything else. Well, no, actually. So again, when we're talking about financial advisors, bank Brad was saying for Bitcoin. No, absolutely not, Brad. You can get into it for much less than 5,000. Absolutely not. Either way. So looking a little further, because we definitely don't set the bar that high there with Bitcoin Well, or they do. All right, back to those banks. So yes, this is where, again, you don't necessarily trust the bank for managing your finances. That's the thing I was talking about with Andrew. Like, we trust other people to take care of that for us. And that's some of our most important stuff. I mean, if aside from the asset that might be our house or whatever, it's your retirement savings, it's your pension, it's your RRSPs, all those things. We might have a great deal of skills in many, many things, but not really be all that great in figuring out our stuff. And you want to trust whoever is helping you direct it. And unfortunately, banks, for a large part, aren't the ones that you can trust. So this agency directed 200 mystery shoppers to pose as everyday customers at banks, and they went to 712 branches, of all the heavyweights, Bank of Montreal, CIBC, Nova Scotia, Toronto Dominion, just to see what they sell for financial products. And it says salespeople routinely recommended products that were not appropriate. In 28% of the cases, the mystery shoppers were applying for credit cards, but then they were urged to take on higher cost premium cards, even if their income didn't warrant it. Speaking of the debt crisis we have, a lot of people too far in the hole, paying high interest on items and things like that. Well, credit card debt's some of the worst debt you can get. And the banks, the people you're supposed to trust and ones like that, are pushing you into those higher cost premium cards because, of course, they get a commission, I'll say, rather than kickback to the bank. But how many people are losing money? How many people are losing as investors because of that? If you want to talk, and I don't see profit as an evil thing. I'm a good old conservative capitalist. I don't hit on that sort of stuff. But still, excess profit, that's a term I despise. But you do got to, if you've got a sector that's pulling in a much higher amount in net than others, then maybe there's not enough competition, or maybe there's something else going wrong in the system. And I tell you what, banking is doing well. You know, a lot of industries are having a hard time in the pandemic and have had a hard time, but the banks were most definitely not one of them. So yeah, the data showed 80% of the shoppers were offered premium credit cards were not asked about their income. See, that should be, you know, kind of a big thing. Don't try and get somebody into a high-end, you know, when you know, if you're supposedly an advisor who knows and cares about the person you're selling something to, you don't want to get somebody into a credit card that's going to put them beyond their means. But if you're an unprincipled person selling it, as it appears in 80% of the cases, at least where they're not even asking, this is how people are getting in trouble. Other mystery shoppers, they were just applying to open a checking account, and they were encouraged to buy overdraft protection or insurance they never asked for. And it's kind of like those car undercoatings and things like that those salesmen always hit you with. Like, you know, you want to pay some massive gross interest? Yeah, have overdraft. Get into that. Overdraw a little bit and see how hard they hit you. You might as well go to the check cashing place down the street as far as those loan sharks go and with what they'll nail you for it. So, yeah, let's go into some more bad finances. Okay, the Freeland tax, yeah, or at least Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's luxury tax on planes, boats, and automobiles will cost jobs and generate less revenue than expected. Not too shocking. That's when you get frivolous, you know, using tax as a tool, as an ideology. It's the low-hanging fruit. You know, we want to tax the rich, tax those people who deserve it, tax those darn people who drive those nice cars, those private planes, get into those nice boats. They don't deserve those things. Let's hit them hard. But what does it really turn into? Well, it doesn't bring in the revenue you thought it would, and it just costs jobs. I mean, this is an industry. This is things. There's people who sell these boats. There's people who maintain these boats. I know, they're boats. Set aside the envy and look at the real outcome of the tax. So this is one of her big selling points. Oh, this big 10% tax on these luxury items, them telling you what you should or shouldn't own, what is moral and not immoral. And they think it might raise $163 million. That's the thing too, when you get the NDP lines and the tax the rich and the vacuous, empty politics of envy. In reality, it doesn't bring in the income they think it will. And it just makes people feel good because they're sticking the thumb in the eye of somebody who did better than them. All right, so we've got Rachel in studio, Rachel Emanuel, and we had a story that was really got some feathers ruffled. It was over an apparent incident in at the very long caucus meeting after Premier Kenney had tendered his resignation as UCP leader. And it sounds like things got pretty raucous between Brian Jean and some other caucus members.
Yeah, absolutely. So the caucus meeting was 6 hours, as you know, and I think following the caucus meeting last week, Thursday, so that was May 19th, many of us in the media were trying to get as much information as we could about what happened, but most of the MLAs that were present in the meeting were being very tight-lipped about what happened. So then I got a leak earlier this week that there was a bit of an altercation that had happened. I had actually heard about it prior, and then I heard it from a second source. So I thought, you know, this is something to pursue. So essentially what had happened, according to the sources I spoke to, which is 5 MLAs who were present in the room in the caucus meeting, was that Brian Jean arrived at the meeting and he was very worked up. In the words of one source, he came in looking for a fight. So he came in, he was already really worked up, just probably maybe about rumors that Kenney might not resign. He wanted Kenney to be gone immediately. He did not want the premier to stay on in the interim. And so he was repeatedly interrupting the proceedings of the meetings and making snipes at his colleagues, calling them names. And what they told me were saying some pretty outrageous things. And it ended with MLA Shane Getson saying, you know, Brian Jean, I think that you should stop talking because every time you open your mouth, you lose support. And Brian Jean did not like that, and then asked Shane Getson if he would like to take things outside. His exact wording was, let's take this outside. So he wanted to move the fight elsewhere. So, and then, you know, some MLAs said, well, actually all the MLAs I spoke to said he actually had to be restrained from getting up and going over to what looked like maybe to attack Shane Getson. So definitely pretty crazy time in caucus. People did tell me things get very lively in the UCP caucus meetings, but certainly nothing to that extent.
No, and I mean, it's unfortunate. Things get heated in caucus meetings. Things get heated in any organization sometimes, but it shows that there's still some serious divisions that the UCP has to deal with. You can't point all fingers at Premier Kenney. Well, now Premier Kenney is out of the picture, or will be, but they've obviously got some very serious internal issues that they're going to have to sort out.
I think so, exactly. But I mean, that's one of the things that's nice about a leadership race is it's an opportunity for someone to come in with a new vision, someone to be unifying. I don't think it's overly surprising that things did get so heated at that caucus meeting. I mean, Brian Jean has been calling on the premier to resign for a very long time. And I think for people that wanted Kenny gone, after he announced that he was resigning, everyone thought, oh, good, this is what we've been hoping for. But then, Kenny decided to stay on in the interim, which is being lauded by the UCP members that supported Kenny. They're saying, well, this is so gracious of him and self-sacrificing for him to stay on during the interim period. But then people who wanted him gone think it's self-serving and that he's just trying to fulfill some sort of legacy. So Jean, being on the camp of people that wanted Kenny gone, was, undoubtedly very ired and irked up about this decision.
Yeah, and it's just it's problematic. I mean, this is the way we're kicking off a leadership race that hasn't even officially started yet. I mean, I'm looking at the federal Conservatives. I've been critical of that just with how vitriolic and divided they're getting. I mean, you might have a new leader, but you could be irreparably split and broken when the race is finished with it. The UCP doesn't have much time. They've got a year before a general election, and they seem to this race could rip them to pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for any conservative leader in Alberta, they actually have one of the hardest jobs in the country because you have more of like a libertarian and small c conservative movement in Alberta than you have really elsewhere in Canada. Like, think about it. In Ontario, which is where I was living when COVID-19 happened and all, like, we had so many shutdowns and lockdowns. It was actually quite a bit worse than it was in Alberta. But Ontarians are just a little bit more complacent. And so that's why we see Doug Ford doing very well in the polls now, whereas many Albertans were out for Premier Kenny's head. And now we're having a leadership race as a result of that. So it's definitely very hard to unify the conservative base here in Alberta. It's an incredibly difficult job. I mean, even everyone who was critical of Kenny said, he had a hard job. The head wears the crown is very heavy. So it's not an easy task. And I think we've got some good candidates putting their name forward. We'll see if anyone is able to unify the more progressive conservatives and the libertarians within. And of course, you've got populists, you've got social conservatives.
It's hard to hold a big tent together. That's a disadvantage that conservatives have, that there's a few types of conservatives. The NDP, they hold unity easily, but that's because by nature, well, if you're into that, you want centralized leadership. You toe the line. I mean, there's people of ambition. They have challenges, but not like conservatives. And they've also got the mixed thing with, this is a party that was a merger of Wild Rose type people and progressive conservatives. And some people still haven't gotten over that, I think.
I think it's quite entertaining because conservatives always kind of are fighting within. And I think it's because they're so principled that people are kind of unwilling to bend to anything. It's like, this is what I believe. This is the right way. I'm not willing to be flexible in my views. Whereas exactly to your point, we don't see that with the NDP super often. And even within the Liberal caucus, we have seen some breaches this year in Justin Trudeau's government, people that didn't agree with his COVID policies, but they were very few and far between. Nothing like what we see in the conservative movement, whether that's federally, whether that's provincially. And actually, House Leader Jason Nixon even commented on that yesterday when he was announcing the end of the legislature. He said, yeah, we have some internal fighting. The NDP does too. They're just a little better at hiding it than we are.
Yeah, well, and when I'd heard that, something going on with Brian Jean, I hadn't heard the details, and challenging somebody to a fight. I know one person I was pretty confident wasn't involved, and it would have been Jason Nixon, or we would have seen the stretcher taking Mr. Jean out of the legislature or the McDougall Center at that point. But all the same, there's just, it's going to be an interesting summer, to say the very least. So at least something as our, legislative bureau chief, that looks like they're closing up their session for the season, probably because it's going to be hard to concentrate on anything policy-wise when you're in the middle of a leadership race and things like that. But you're going to have lots to keep you busy in following this now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not complaining. We have the UCP leadership race here provincially and the conservative race federally. So there'll definitely be a lot going on, which is often a problem in the summer. There's just not a ton of news. So certainly won't be an issue this year.
Right on. Well, thanks for coming in to give us the update on it and for writing the story. And of course, you're following up and seeing if anything more develops out of this. And just to throw out, you were that lone Oilers fan who went to the game last night. So
yes, and my team won. So
yeah,
I should have placed a bet.
You're heading back to Edmonton. Stay up there, cover that stuff. All right. Well, that's another Battle of Alberta. At least that one's been settled for now. Now it's just the ongoing one in the UCP caucus. So we'll see what happens with that, and look forward to your reports from it.
Great. Thanks very much.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. All right, so that was Rachel Emmanuel, and just that reminder, westernstandard.news. She writes, she's got that nice little office up there in the Edmonton legislature. I think we displaced Maclean's magazine. I guess maybe Jason Markusoff used to reside in there or something. I'm not sure, but we do have a presence. And again, just that reminder to thanking all those subscribers and advertisers. That's how we can do it. Getting out there, getting that news. I know some people, somebody was saying, I didn't know this was the National Enquirer now. Well, no, but you don't report just always on straight out policy. We talk about events and things that happen. These are personalities. These are people. And some of it might sound a bit gossipy. As was said, if you look at the story too, this was not just a rumor from one person or two in there. This was corroborated by over 5 elected officials and other people who were there at that time when this eruption occurred. So it really did happen. The basis of it, the full thing, well, that leads it to a bit of speculation, who was the real instigator, what led to Mr. Jean losing control for a period like that. Was he goaded, or was he just being too thin-skinned? I don't know. But we're going to talk about those things. We're going to cover those things. We talk about, important and bigger issues as well, of course. But, hey, these are the people that are going to be leading us. This is the race that's coming up. And character is a part of the race as well, not just policy. And this is indicative of some of the character of the people who want to be in charge there. Let's see a little bit of other news here. Dave mentioned that the Beer King gets a nature grant. Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, everybody's favorite jumpsuit-wearing eco-lunatic, he approved a 6-figure climate change grant to Labatt's. Yeah, isn't that nice? Small businesses struggle. Small businesses hurt, and they have a hard time. And again, I'm not opposed to big business. You need big business too. I don't want government subsidizing any business. But I've said this before, when the government puts out billions to these heavyweights all the time, this is only 250,000, but it's the principle of it. Billions to these great big businesses, and they have a terrible return rate, especially if it's guaranteed loans, things like that, and these businesses go broke or they piss it away on other things. If you took $1 billion, that's $1,000 million. Well, you could give $10,000 to 100,000 people as seed money to start small businesses, if you broke it up that way, rather than $1 billion just to Bombardier or something. Out of that, how much more return would we get? How many more creative business ideas? How many neat ideas, whether it's from a coffee shop to just a little software place that needed a little Kickstarter, whatever, or 10,000 people getting, $100,000. Like, these things could get things going. But giving money to these multi-billion-dollar companies, it doesn't seem to be paying off well. Again, I'd rather not give to either. But either way, yeah, this brewery got $250,000, small amount to some, but to me, when I owned a bar, for example, hey, $250,000, I could do a lot of upgrades with that. But this was to Labatt, which is part of Anheuser-Busch. This is where our money goes, guys. And Minister Guilbeault says, that's worth it because they're saving the world from climate change because apparently, diesel boilers in breweries are a big part of our problem. Here's another interesting one. This was from the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council. This is kind of a bit gossipy too, but the ruling was interesting. Vax status is nobody's business and is fundamentally private, and that's, so this was a radio announcer, I believe it was, and he outed a listener as being unvaccinated, Lachlan Cross. The choice, let's see, this is what the council wrote. The choice of whether or not to be vaccinated has been hotly debated on all media and has been the subject of public and personal recriminations. However, whether one is vaccinated or not constitutes medical information, and that's fundamentally private. So this Cross, this announcer at CKEA Edmonton, an FM station, in a topic of the day broadcast last February, identified an acquaintance by name as unvaccinated. And he said, I'm judgmental. I've avoided him. I've avoided his phone calls. I've avoided his texts. And said he was upset that his unvaccinated friend would attend a Super Bowl party at a local bar. He says, I don't want to go now. I still want to follow the rules. He says, I've been a follower through this whole pandemic. Clearly he is. But that's interesting, So he used his platform to shame somebody he knew. He used his radio seat to publicly name somebody and talk about their medical status. And thankfully, at least the Broadcast Council ruled the right way and said, no, you crossed a line. This is wrong. Medical information is private and confidential. It's bad enough with our workplaces and vax passports and all that going on. But to have some arsehole like him read out a friend's name because he's got a chip on his shoulder over him going to a Super Bowl party, again, that's an abuse of somebody's platform and reach and media. I mean, I get onto the media, of course, it's social media, Twitter, on here, and I'm nasty to some public figures and so on, but I don't call them out on their medical status. I've got beefs with friends or enemies, if you want, over the years, but I don't use my Twitter account to go after them or my show here. So either way, he got slapped for it at least, and maybe that's a good step in the right direction. Some regulatory bodies are realizing that, hey, some lines have been crossed. Speaking of broadcasters, I'll finish up with this one. The state broadcaster, the CBC, our $1.5 billion monster there, is now saying climate change is causing you lost sleep. Yes, there's more hot nights, so you're sweatier and you're rolling more and whatever. So thus, it's yet one more thing. If you're tired in the morning, the way to fix it's with a carbon tax, because we got to stop climate change and we can tax ourselves out of it. And the reason you're tired is because climate change. Everything's climate change, isn't it? Jeez, never stops. But that's our tax dollars at work. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go for the weekend. Make sure to tune in Monday. We're going to have former member of Parliament, Jay Hill, and he was the interim leader at the Maverick Party on. We're just going to talk some federal politics. I mean, Jay is now an unsigned free agent as far as politics goes, and it makes him for a good commentator because with 17 years sitting in Parliament as government whip and a number of other roles, he's got a lot of insight he can lend and share on these issues. So I'm going to talk to him, and we'll round up another guest by then as well. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. We'll see you 11:30 a.m. Monday morning.